Hello, this is Dr. Gloria Walker of Tree of Life broadcast. Thank you for logging on. I want to talk to you today a little bit about grief. So many people have lost loved ones due to COVID, and because of the world we live in today with so much violence, I can only imagine how many people are grieving. In addition to that, I see it myself every day, as a chaplain, and I also lead a support group through my church. And so I am aware of people grieving. And so I wanted to make this video because of some of the comments that I hear the people make, the participants make in my group, some of the things that we discuss that they share with me in terms of people being insensitive when they are grieving. And I think that most people are not aware of their insensitive comments. And so I just wanted to make this video to make people more aware, and ask that you be just more sensitive of your own behavior when you're around people that are grieving, and really be intentional about the comments that you make, the things that you say. And for those of you who may be grieving, I want to make you mindful of something in case you're not aware of it. If you are in need of grief support, there's an organization where you can get free grief support from a church. And some of the grief support is offered in-house and some is online. You can go to www.griefshare.org and type in your zip code to find a support group in your area. Like I said, some of the support groups are online through GriefShare, and some are held in-house at a particular church. But you'll need to type in your zip code to find a location, okay? Scripture says in Psalms 34:18 that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. Grief is probably one of the most difficult emotions that we will experience as human beings. One of the hardest emotions that we will experience is when our heart is aching over the loss of a loved one. And I am familiar with grief as well. For those of you who don't know my testimony, I lost a husband in a car accident in my early 20s. I was widowed, and I was in a car accident with my husband, and he did not survive. I was injured, but I survived, obviously. And so I am very acquainted with the pain of grief, and the Lord has miraculously turned that around. Romans 8:28 says, all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. So the Lord has turned that around in my life, and now has used that situation, that traumatic event in my life, to enable me to minister to others and support others as they go through loss and grief. Okay. So there are a couple of things that I just want to touch on in this video. The first thing is, and some of these points that I'm going to touch on are come from the facilitator's guide, but they also come from personal comments that some of the participants have made during our discussions. Okay, and one of this first comment is coming from the actual comment that a participant shared in my grief support group. One of the participants in my group shared that her husband passed, and this young lady is in her early 30s. She said her husband passed, and they had the funeral on a Friday. And on Sunday, she had relatives that came over to her house. You know how people bring food over, after a funeral. So there was food and stuff that was brought over, which was, that needs to be done, because when you're grieving, you certainly don't feel like cooking. So that was a good thing. But when the relatives came over, they also, without asking, started going through this young lady's closet and removing her husband's things, and going in the garage and removing her husband's things and packing them up, saying, okay, where do you want us to take these things? And because the young lady was grieving, I mean, she was in bed. She said she didn't have the energy to even stop them. She was just in bed crying, just in bed crying. And she shared this in the support group. And then she finally, which is another thing that grief does. Grief will cause you, grief actually causes emotional changes to occur in your brain, and it affects your cognition and your memory, and it definitely will cause you to overreact or be hypersensitive. So this young lady, when she had enough, she got out of the bed, went off on her family, and put them out of the house. Of course, they thought that she was being irrational, and there was a big argument, and you know, a big argument. And they said they were trying to help, and they weren't going to come back, and they were going to leave her alone, and she could do it all herself. That's not what she needed to hear. Completely insensitive. She needed help, but when she wanted the help. So that's one thing I want to share with you. Please don't go to someone's house that's grieving, even if it's your family member. Don't go to somebody's house trying to pack up the deceased person's belongings. The person, the spouse, or the closest loved one to the deceased person will decide when that happens. You should not take it upon yourself to do that, okay? Wait for somebody to tell you they need help in that regard, or they want help in that regard, okay? The next point I want you to understand is when someone is grieving, please understand that they may not be up for celebrations, okay? For instance, if someone you know loses a loved one around the holidays, let's just say they lose a loved one in August, and we know Thanksgiving and Christmas is coming up a few months from August. They are still not going to be in a celebratory mood. Grief takes a long time. So please understand, you may have to do your celebrating without the person that's grieving, okay? Don't expect them to feel like you feel. Give them space, okay? In the GriefShare videos that I use, there was a person that talked about she lost, I think it was her husband, and when she went back to work, when she came back to work after losing her husband, how people on her job just began to give her tasks and say things like, oh, we're so glad you're back now. We need you to do this and we need you to do that. If you work with someone that lost a loved one, please be sensitive and don't jump all over them. They lost a loved one. Be sensitive. Okay? Offer help. Not to go into somebody's house and clean out their belongings, but offer help. Like if you know a woman lost her husband and her husband used to maintain the yard, call her up and ask her, if she needs help getting the grass cut. If she needs to take the car to the dealership for an oil change. If she needs, a couple of items from the store, that kind of help. Okay, not to just come into somebody's house. And in another video, it was shared that a man lost his wife, and he went out to run an errand, and some of his family members came over and rearranged the furniture from how his wife had it placed, because she died, completely rearranged the furniture in the house. And when he came back from running errands, he was flabbergasted when he walked in the door and saw that his home looked nothing like, he was accustomed to it looking. And he asked them, "Why did you do that?" And they said, "Well, we just thought it would be helpful for you to have something that looked different." But he didn't want that. He wanted to have his memories, his familiar memories of when his wife used to sit there on the couch, you know, instead of the couch now being someplace else, or the couch not even being there anymore, or the plants his wife had, now being not by the window anymore, but now being, someplace else. Just things being rearranged. Don't do that to people. Don't do that. Don't do that. Another thing that we should not do to people who are grieving is don't avoid them. I did some research as a chaplain, and one of the things that people do is, particularly church folk, when somebody in the church loses someone they love, I mean, we are right there front and center in the beginning. We come and we offer our condolences. "I'm so sorry about, your loss. I'm praying for you." And then the next time we see them, we kind of go the other way. And the research that I did, the study that I read, said that people do that because it's awkward. They don't know what to say the next time. Don't do that either. Say something. Just go over to the person and say, "I was just wondering how you're feeling today. Is there anything I can do?" Just say something. Don't avoid them. People need to know that you care. People need to know that you have not forgotten about them when they're grieving. Okay? Another thing that you need to be mindful of when people are grieving is that even though they may have lost a spouse, let's just say they lost a spouse, a lot of people will feel like, well, now that you don't have a spouse anymore, you have all this time on your hands. So let's go out. Let's go do this. Let's go do, whatever, because you're not married anymore. But that's not necessarily so, because this other person is missing in their life. Now they have to pick up the slack. Let's just say you had a husband who used to pay all the bills, used to take the cars to get all the maintenance done, used to take care of the lawn, used to, do all the little upkeep around the house, and now he's gone, and it's the wife. Well, now the wife has to sit down and look at the checkbook and budget and pay all the bills, and is responsible for the upkeep of the yard, and now has to, keep up with, when the air conditioning filter needs to be changed and all of those things. So they don't have extra time on their hands. They have to pick up the slack of the duties that they have now taken on, because they no longer have that other person in their life that they used to have. Okay? So let's not think that, it's time to go party because all of a sudden a spouse is gone. No, they have more responsibility in most cases. More responsibility. You will not believe this, but there are some really insensitive things that people say. And one of the GriefShare videos that we all watched. There was a lady who lost a child, and one of her friends, it was a very young child, a baby actually. And one of this lady's friends has said to her, well, at least you won't have to potty train. What kind of thing is that to say? Or, to even put, to assign a level of importance or more weight um, to a situation of loss having more significance than another. For instance, a baby being less sorrowful than a grown person because the baby didn't have a long life. There is no such thing as a level of importance when it comes to grief. The heart doesn't have a scale. You can't put it on a pain level 3 or pain level 7. When you're grieving, it just hurts, and it hurts really bad. Okay, whether the baby was 2 days old or whether the person that passed was 65 years old, grief is grief. Okay, so let's be sensitive when we are around people who are grieving. Okay, offer to help where you can. All right, those who are experiencing grief, sometimes you may have to ask for help. Don't hesitate to reach out to your church community, to your family, to friends. There is a such thing as writing a grief letter. You can be tactful. You can mail a letter. You can send it in an email, just to give people a heads up on how you're feeling. So, you won't have to have those moments where you go off on somebody. You can just send them an email and say, hey, guys, I appreciate you being here for me, but I'm grieving. I'm having some really difficult emotions right now. Some days I feel okay. Other days it's really hard for me. Because here's the fact of the matter. Grief comes in ebbs and flows. One day you will feel okay. It's just like a wave. You know how waves go in and out, in and out. That's how grief is. One day you'll feel okay, and the next day you feel like you've hit rock bottom again, and you don't know what's wrong with you. Nothing's wrong with you. Unusual. You're grieving. That's how grief is. And there's no certain amount of time that you need to be over it. But I will say this: if you're in a place after a year where you don't want to get out of bed, where you don't want to go anywhere, you don't want to socialize at all, then you may be experiencing complicated grief, and you should probably see a doctor. And that's why when you're grieving, it can be very helpful to get in a support group like GriefShare, like what I facilitate. It can be very helpful to that, to do that, because the people that are in the group that I facilitate, I've asked them, is this group helping you? And they say, oh, yes. I look forward to logging on and talking with other people about, how I feel, and sharing things with people who can relate to how I feel. Let me give you an example. We, or the participants in the group, can openly and honestly share exactly what is on their mind about how they feel while they're grieving, and there's no judgment passed on them. One of the things that comes up in the facilitator's guide that I bring up and bring forth for discussion is jealousy. For instance, let's just say a mother loses their child and she has other friends around her that have children. She may feel some jealousy at their relationship that they still have their children. We talk about things like that, and the participants in my group have confessed to having those feelings, and they can openly share those feelings. But guess what? If you were to say something like that outside of our group, maybe express it to a coworker. I'm so jealous of you and your relationship with your daughter. You know, people might pass judgment on that. I can't believe what she said. She said she was jealous of us. But in a grief support group, we understand. It's normal to feel that way because you loved your loved one. It's normal to feel that way. You're just missing someone that you love. It's perfectly normal. Okay? So that's what I wanted to talk to you about, being sensitive, around people who grieve, and just, watch the things that you say, offer to help, but don't, stay in your lane with the help. Don't go in somebody's house removing belongings. Don't do that. That is highly, highly insensitive. You are stepping way over boundaries doing that, okay? And don't ever tell somebody that they should be over something. I lost my husband back in the 1980s, and I still think of him very often. Often. You never forget somebody. God gave us a memory. He doesn't expect us to forget anything. But I've had to move forward in life, okay? Have to move forward, but you don't forget people, okay? So those are some of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. If you are someone watching this video and you are grieving, please know that God cares about your pain. If I had to give you any advice on how to get through grief, I would say prayer every day. Take one day at a time. Don't push yourself too hard. Please take time to rest. Rest is critical. Don't overload yourself with stuff. Do you know that one lady shared in my support group that, because again, I just explained that grief affects your memory, grief affects your cognition. I remember one day, when I was grieving my husband's death, debit cards and pins and ATMs had just come out. And I went to the ATM and I was going to withdraw some money. And I knew my ATM, like I know my name is Gloria. It was my ATM, my pin, I knew it. It was easy for me to remember. I went to get some money out of the bank, but because I was grieving, I drew a complete blank. I could not think of what it was. And I sat there and I sat there and I sat there. And I couldn't remember what it was. It was only 4 digits. I couldn't remember what it was. Guess what it was? It was my mom's birthday. I know my mom's birthday. I couldn't remember what it was to save my life. I went home. About 3 days later, I remembered what my pen was. So, you have to be real careful when you're grieving, because one of the participants in my group shared with me that she's been grieving the loss of her daughter, and she has been driving to work sometimes, not even realizing how she got to work. Just pulling in a parking space, putting the car in park, and turning the ignition off. not even remembering how she got there, not remembering stop signs, not remembering if the light was red or green. And that is very dangerous. Mind just wandering, lost in thought, thinking about her daughter, because her daughter was murdered. Just lost in thought. When you are grieving, you have to be very, very careful. Okay? If you are watching this video and you enjoy my ministry, please consider partnering with me. Please send me your prayer request. You can write me at 950 Eagles Landing Parkway, P.O. Box 778, Stockbridge, Georgia 30281. All right? Send me your prayer request. I will pray over them. And if there's a return address and you want me to, I will write you back. Otherwise, I will just lay hands on your prayer request and be in prayer with you. All right? If you're somebody watching me and you've never received salvation, never asked Christ into your life, I would pray that you will do that today and don't wait another moment. Romans 10:9-10 says, if you believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ died and rose, you will be saved. All right? I thank you for logging on. I thank you for watching. I pray that this ministry is a blessing to you. Peace and blessings to you. And like I say, whatever you're going through, go on through it. It's going to be over after a while. I promise you. I have had much adversity in my life. God has not failed me. He has always brought me through. He is faithful. He is not a man that he should lie, nor is he a respecter of persons. If he brought me through, he will bring you through as well. All right? Peace and blessings until we meet again. Take care.